Hello, everyone. There's plenty more seats down the front if you don't have any. What? So bad. Welcome to the March meetup. This is David. I'm Matt.
That's Matt. David.
Paul.
Yeah. So, who's our first timer at the Infracoders? Cool. Good. We like to see new blood. It's always good. Quick poll. So, I don't think we've done this before, but I'm curious to know what sort of people we have in the room. Bearded people, yes. I'm interested in the companies that you guys work for and the size. So who's here from a startup? Who's in say a company that has 5 people or 20, small? Yep. Who's in a sort of a medium-sized business, say 20 to 100 people? Yep. And how many sort of the larger 100 plus? Enterprise. Yeah, we've never sort of sold before.
I thought it would have been called the other way, which is really good.
It's catching on.
It is mainstream.
Yeah, so we have 2 talks tonight.
For realestate.com.au or REA Group, whichever one you prefer, I guess.
Yep. We've got an intro from Nigel Dawson. Might go into that first, and then we'll go into the talks.
Feel a bit like the odd guy out wearing the pink shirt at the front, but don't worry, I don't work in sales. I won't try and recruit you, sell you an advert on a website or anything like that. But I just wanted to say, as a lot of the IT people here, we had a huge stake in the design of this building, and it was our dream all along to see this floor used in a kind of public, private way for meetups and the communities that exist within Melbourne and Australia, and have lots of people along. So this is actually the first time I've seen it done at any scale, and it's a moment of great pride to see you all here. So welcome along, and we hope to see you back again at some time in the future. It's a pretty weird and wild workspace. We had a lot of fun building it. This is the most boring floor by far, so you're not really seeing the colourful parts of it, but yeah, do enjoy your time here. As everyone on my team know, I'm not an engineer, so I'm kind of like the least qualified to be standing up in front and saying anything about this. And bizarrely, I'm opening a conference tomorrow on the subject of IT operations and infrastructure and continuous delivery and all those kind of things. But my topic on that one is how essentially this new way of working will break your organization. And that's something I am quite passionate about. And in the course of putting that together, I went back through the time when this organization was moving to this way of working. Because I walked in here with that change happening and underway. And I walked into a set of exit interview information with some people, exit survey information from some people who hadn't made it through that transition. And I was looking at that and going, wow, this really did raise, this movement, this way of working really did raise the passions of people who've been working in technology as engineers for their whole lives. And some of the sentiment of the things they were saying were that there's just no way in hell this crazy-ass way of working run by zealots will ever come off. I was kind of thinking to myself, that was a possibility. That was a possibility that we might not have pulled off such a radical way of working where traditionally I still get shit for separation of duties from SOX people and all of those kind of things, and some crazy people asking me, where's the head of IT operations? He's at Telstra because he left 2 years ago. But it's just incredible pride that you're all part of a thing that's going to make Australian businesses a whole lot better. And I know it's hard, and I know it's new, and you really are turning organisations upside down. But you should take some great pride in that. And so welcome along to this place. I wouldn't know shit about what's going to be talked there this evening, but I rely on always having great people working around us to see where that's relevant and to share those stories. So I encourage you great you to do that. Make yourselves at home. Thanks to the organisers, and we hope to see you back here again soon. That would be super cool.
Great, thank you. So if this is your first time, normally we have 2 talks, some refreshments, and then a bit of networking at the end, but we've kind of flipped it on its head because the food got here early. So first up, we've got Michael Wu talking about some cool stuff at Auspost. Go.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael and I work at Australia Post, and today I'm just going to have a chat to you guys about scaling automation in an enterprise. Firstly, a bit of background on Australia Post. It's over a 200-year-old government-owned corporation, and the primary activities that we do are the delivery of letters and parcels, as well as some other services via the retail outlets. And as with all organisations in 2015, more and more of our customers are interacting with us on digital channels, so it's becoming a larger and larger focus. I work as part of a department called the Digital Delivery Centre. It was established only 2.5 years ago, and we have agile teams practicing a specific brand of agile called SAFE. We develop and manage all the consumer-facing Australia Post digital applications, as well as some business-facing ones as well. And we're pretty much a Java shop, running on Linux platforms and using an API-first strategy. So here are some examples of the applications that we develop and manage. So tracking your parcel, looking for the local post office, doing postage calculations, or buying some travel services, things like travel insurance and doing currency conversion. And we have about 30 or so of these applications currently in operation. Looking back a little over a year ago, we had all our applications hosted on a managed service provider. And they looked after everything from the operating system down, including all the infrastructure. At the time, there were no configuration management at all. So all the processes were done manually. And I think, as everyone in this room will understand, having manual processes will greatly impact the quality of outputs that you end up having around your infrastructure. And it also impacts the ability to adapt to change and how quickly we can provision infrastructure. So we really began a journey of DevOps and automation, and it's a process that took over several months with lots of tech spikes and trial and error, and involving lots of development teams to gain feedback around the automation we're doing, whether it was relevant to their needs and the tweaks we can provide. It was also done in a very minimal viable product way, so we always wanted to ship small components, get it out there to the dev teams, gain feedback and feed it back into the development process. The main challenge for us is simply the diversity of the applications and teams we had to support. So with over 30 or 40 different applications, and each of these applications had different levels of maturity. They were also in different states of activeness, so some of these applications wouldn't have been touched for over a year. And also different teams had different levels of maturity and had different processes, and were using different frameworks. So this was a key challenge for us, just solving for the diversity of the entire department. So to skip forward several months, what we ended up with is essentially 2 artifacts for automating everything from infrastructure to configuration management and application deployment. The first artifact is the automation code artifact, and it contained all the automation code logic. So we were using technologies such as CloudFormation for infrastructure provisioning in AWS, Puppet for configuration management, and Python for some of the deployment processes, as well as some of the glue that glued together the different sets of technology. The other artifact was a configuration artifact, and the configuration artifact contained all the different configuration that we have that were different between environments and application. And we predominantly used Puppet Hire for that, and I'll talk in a bit more detail on what we're doing in that space. I just wanted to give a quick run through on how these two artifacts fit together within a provisioning process. So essentially what happens is on our CI server, we download the code and config artifacts, and the CI server will then call CloudFormation APIs, and CloudFormation will handle infrastructure provisioning. So things like ELDs, servers, auto-scale groups, or security groups, and a data store if there is one. When the instances are booting up, they'll each download both artifacts as well as any other artifact that is required for the provisioning of the application. So it might be a JRE binary or the actual WAR file that it's deploying. And then we initialize Puppet. So Puppet does all the operating system configuration, as well as installing and configuring all the web and application containers. Once that is done, we actually deploy the applications on top. So typically for us, it might be an Angular app on the web tiers and some Java or Node.js application on the application tiers. When the health checks come back all healthy, then the stack is pretty much available for people to use. And we provision quite a different set of varieties of stacks. So a very simple one is the one on the left, a typical web stack with Nginx. And we use this typically to do all the content routing behind ozpost.com.au. So when you hit ozpost.com.au, this tier will handle where to route the traffic to the different applications. Another typical stack we provision is a web stack with Apache, and these stacks tend to host a lot of our static and also client-based JavaScript client-facing apps. By far the most popular stack is a Java application stack, and we run Tomcat with a version of the JRE, and this hosts all our API-first applications, and some of them may or may not have RDS database, access to S3 bucket or a DynamoDB database. We also enforce a bunch of both departmental and organizational rules around all these stacks. So we integrate all these stacks with New Relic and CloudWatch for monitoring. They all log to our centralized Splunk centralized logging server, and all traffic within and between the stacks are encrypted with SSL, and all the certs assigned by our internal CAs. I think with automation, like configuration is quite an important piece to it. So I wanted to dive a bit deeper into configuration. Separation of code and config is pretty much a no-brainer if you don't want to repeat yourself. And there are lots of mature tools out there already that cater for this. So Hira for Puppet and Databags for Chef. And they provide a lot of configuration features that you might want, such as inheritance and hierarchy of configurations, and also encryption of sensitive data. We use Hira quite extensively, and I understand it's only been a couple of months since someone did a deep, in-depth talk on Hira, so I won't go into too much detail here. But Hira is essentially a key value lookup tool used in conjunction with Puppet. It's in a YAML format, and you typically define custom facts, such as an environment where you define production, test, and dev, and all the configuration differences between each of those environments. So that's a very typical usage of Hira. And here are some other typical usages. So basically driving your configuration management. So things like defining your name servers, your NTP servers, and the differences between your different environments. We also use it to define things like the new Relic license key, because we have different accounts for dev, test, and prod, and we want to segment all the dev stack into the new Relic dev sub-account. But not only do we use Hira to drive our configuration management, we also use it to drive the configuration of our infrastructure. So this might be not a standard use case, but we define items such as the VPC ID, the subnet IDs, and this really highlights for our applications where they should be deployed to between the different environments. And we also define more application-specific infrastructure configurations. So what image the application is using by the AMI ID, the ELB health checks, the size of your auto scale group, or whether your database is in HA mode or not. And how this is put together is essentially we have a bunch of Python scripts that will do the provisioning of the stacks, and we use a little module called HiraPy to interrogate our Hira database and pull out the infrastructure values to populate the parameters in our CloudFormation templates. So we populate parameters such as the ELB health check, the certificate, the instance size, which subnets the application should be deployed to, and so forth. On top of configuration management and infrastructure, we also define a bunch of application-specific configurations. So the top here, we're defining the artifacts we're deploying onto these stacks. In this very case, we're deploying an app called parcel tracking. And we define where we're deploying the application to, which path we're deploying it to, the target container, and the file format. So our deployment scripts can read this configuration file and understand the artifact and how to deploy it. We also define application configuration itself, used by the application. So things like the database URL, the usernames and passwords, and also third-party endpoints such as Google reCAPTCHA and the private key used to access that account. So essentially, we're treating automation and configuration, whether it's infrastructure, configuration management, or application deployment, exactly in the same way. And by doing so, we have found that there are lots of efficiency gained from that and simplification of certain processes. And I just wanted to run through one of these processes. So this is a typical deployment process that we employ for our stacks. So in this example, I want to deploy a new application with some infrastructure changes. What I do is I go in and make my Puppet and CloudFormation and Hira changes, push it up onto my Git server, do the standard pull request and code review. And then I'm ready to update the stack with the new version of my 2 artifacts. From there, I increase the auto scale group from 2 to 4 servers, and the new servers are going to pick up the new launch config defined by the stack. And once that's done, I'll then shrink the size of the auto scale group from 4 to 2. And that's essentially the end of my deployment process. But it's not just the deployment process, it's actually every single process for updating an existing stack. So whether it's for modifying the endpoints my application needs to talk to, whether it's patching for security vulnerabilities, both infrastructure or on the operating system level. So changing ELB security policies or patching glibc on Linux. Whether it's certificate rotation, so updating trust scores and updating certificates. And it could also be used for stack enhancements. So if I wanted a database with my stack, or I wanted an S3 bucket with my stack, if I needed to upgrade my version of Java or Tomcat, it's the exact same process as the deployment process. So just a quick recap. Essentially, we have two artifacts that provision everything from infrastructure configuration management to the application deployment itself. And it's designed to work for all applications and teams within the department. And I mentioned earlier, like catering for the number of teams and applications was like the main challenge for us. So solving the issue of diversity of assets and teams. And normally when we talk about solving for diversity in automation, we're talking about standards and patterns and stencils and platforms, so terms such as these. And I personally think there's a lot that can be learned from the existing platform as a service leaders out there, such as Heroku and Elastic Beanstalk. They have exactly the same challenges as well. They have to cater for a wide consumer base, yet they need to keep everything churning along. So how they've solved it is by providing a bunch of guiding principles around how developers should work within this framework. So things like how you should compile your artifact, how you're consuming environment configuration, and some standard cloud principles around being stateless or having shared states, so you can horizontally scale in and out. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be learnt from these providers. And although we never intended to build a PaaS from the beginning, we've essentially ended up with something that is very similar in that it's a platform that manages the entire life cycle of an application, going from dev, test to prod, and getting updated and getting patched and so forth. So where are we today? We're actually 100% in AWS for our digital assets, and that was largely thanks to a lift and shift project that happened at the end of last year. And currently we have over 150 active application stacks across all our environments, and 25% of our production applications are now running on these new stacks. So new initiatives launched last year, such as the new consumer-centric portal called MyPost. All the new services behind that are operating on the new stack, as with our developer center, where it's a portal for developers that want to interact with our APIs. It's got test harnesses and documentation. That's also on our new stack. And what's next for us? Currently, we're in the process of developing an API that sits above all these stacks that provides a lot of the functionalities dev teams want to be able to interact and manage their stacks. And we're doing that with Python and Django REST framework. And the other challenge for us at the moment is the department is talking a lot about microservices and microservice architectures. So we need to be up for the challenge of catering for more services and the interactions between these services. We're hiring at the moment, so if any of you are interested in pursuing any of these challenges, please contact me on some of the contact details provided. That's it from me today.
Surely there's questions?
So with that microservices concept, is that looking at Docker or anything?
We might be, but not sure.
Does that come up in conversation a lot?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you're deploying and you're changing your code, you have sticky sessions or something, so customers midway through transactions don't inclusive way?
Yeah, so typically on all our new application stacks, the principle for developers is to keep them stateless or with a shared state. So typically we don't have those kind of sticky session issues, but it is possible to enable sticky sessions on ELBs and base it around a JSession ID cookie, for example. So that is an option for those applications that have a bit of legacy to them.
Michael, who's accountable for the security within those stacks? Which part of the organisation?
Yeah, so it's really a shared responsibility. So the team that looks after a lot of the automation code does a lot of that, but we also have a separate digital security team. And all this code is up on our repository, so it's kind of their job to interrogate some of what we're doing and provide feedback on some of the practices.
More conservative organisations have the distinction and often the network delineation between the test and dev and the prod. Do you promote directly from your test dev environments into the prod with this method? And do you even have that distinction anymore?
So at the moment, there are humans involved with the promotion between test and prod, but anywhere else there isn't any process involved. It's really up to the individual dev teams to get their code right. They are all in separate AWS accounts. So we've got a dev, test, and prod accounts in separate VPCs. So there are some network delineation.
Do you find there's a bit of friction between the rest of your organisation with existing processes and tools that you've got?
So I can only speak on behalf of the Digital Delivery Centre. So we're one small IT sliver in the big AusPost enterprise. But I think everyone's starting. This is just to start the discussion, really, and I think all the other departments are getting more interested in it, and there are some traction there as well.
Yeah, when you talk about your different levels of maturity on your products, do you have a way of measuring that, or is that sort of a gut feel?
It's mainly a gut feel. We do have some tools like SonarCube and things that provide some metrics around that, but yeah, it's mainly a gut feel.
So that human process you talked about, is that the dev team moving to production, or is that a completely different team?
Yeah, so at the moment, we have a change management process, and it's an operations team that deploy to production. But that might change very soon.
Is that operations that just push a red button and deploy button stuff, or are they doing anything manually?
It's pretty much pushing a button.
And just on sorry. If you've got a non-strategic app that you're told to deliver 6 months worth, are you planning on putting it on that automation, or you just like common off the shelf sort of product like that?
Yeah, that's interesting because we are doing one of them right now, one of the new CMS products. So we might have to cater for that a little bit with the automation. I'm not too sure actually.
Do you do any AP testing or anything like that in these deployments, or is it purely just that's the version?
Yeah, so currently we don't. Yeah.
In terms of evolving the applications for the future, if you wanted all of your services on your platform to have a common endpoint or use a different way of logging or something like that, what's the process that you go through to do that through your teams?
I don't really know. We do have, now that all the application configurations are in Hira, it is possible to have that endpoint in a higher bit of the hierarchy and have everyone else inherit off that endpoint. So we do have the technology around that. I guess it's just the coordination between the teams now.
Last question. Just me, guys.
Is your Splunk instance in the cloud aggregating all your logs? And is that infrastructure logs as well as your application
Yeah, so it's pretty much all the logs. It's sitting in AWS in one of the VPCs, and we have forwarders in each of our different VPCs as well.
Great.
All right, thanks
Thank you.
for your talk, Mike.